Welcome to Empower Wyandotte. I'm your host, Jessica Schmidtberger, a third-year doctoral occupational therapy student at the University of Kansas Medical Center in Kansas City, Kansas. In this space, we jump into meaningful conversations about the systems around us and what's affecting health in our community so we can step more confidently into conversations and action in our own communities. Today, we have Kelly Gough Moran, the Director of Development and Communications at CrossLines Community Outreach, an organization serving people affected by poverty in Kansas City, Kansas, on the podcast to talk about evidence-based strategies for communication in the nonprofit space. At the end of this episode, I will provide some resources and information that connects this discussion with evidence so we can all move forward from this conversation confident in what we learn. Thanks for being here. Here's Kelly. What's shaped the way that you communicate, the way you tell stories, the way that you speak about your job and the population that you're serving, the people that you're connecting with through partnerships, through different areas of your job?
Yeah, absolutely. So we really focus on a more modern trend in nonprofit communications and storytelling is what's called ethical storytelling. And that's a change from decades of philanthropy communication that focuses on the donor as the hero. Kind of shifting away from that and thinking about the people we serve as the heroes of their own story. So we really focus on strengths-based communication and setting aside the donor as the hero and more positioning the donor as a member of the community that they are trying to improve. So kind of placing our donors, our supporters, our neighbors, and the people we serve all kind of on a level playing field and explaining that we all have the same goal, which is for everyone to be prosperous and successful and happy, whatever that looks like for them.
That makes so much sense. Ethical storytelling, it feels really centered on who people are in that community-based approach. That's incredible.
Absolutely. And we really try to focus on I have this reminder in my office that people are not a set of their worst days. I mean, we see people on their worst days. We see people in crisis. We serve people who are experiencing the worst times of their lives, but that doesn't define them as people. And we really want to make sure that our supporters and our donors understand that you're not saving someone who can't help themselves, but you're providing support to someone who is trying to improve their own life.
How has that pivot in communication gone, or how do donors and people in the community receive this type of storytelling, this ethical storytelling, this strengths-based, dignity-based kind of approach that you take?
Yeah, I think that people really appreciate it. I think that, it's been a slow shift, and you will still see a lot of nonprofit communications that are centering the donor as the hero. There's a million different ways to communicate one idea, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but what we really want to focus on is creating a sense of community that not to sound cliche, but the days that we live in can be very lost. So just that reminder of, and that inclusiveness of, bringing everyone under the same tent and not setting the people we serve apart or the people who donate to support our organization apart, is that we are all, part of the same community and we have the same goals.
Yeah.
And I think that, as new generations become more able to share their resources, I think that they really appreciate that message and showing as the organization who is receiving their resources that we understand that they want to be a part of a community, and not that, you can talk about saviorism, you can talk about a lot of things associated with that, but we want them to understand that we do not see ourselves as saviors. Absolutely. And we don't see them as saviors. So
there's a lot of intention in the way that you're going about all of these situations.
I mean, I think that words matter, and the way that you communicate a story matters, and the way that we express the needs of our community matters, and the way that we help people understand what we do and why we do it really does matter.
Absolutely. And communicating it effectively through stories, through all of these different means that you're sharing maybe that is the effective way to do it. Like you said, there's 1,000,001 different ways to engage in storytelling, engage in telling people about the stats of your organization, all of these things. Something that you've talked about that you kind of spearheaded is an experience where folks who maybe donate or volunteer their time go through your program experiences, go through the market, go through the kitchen, and experience that firsthand. And that's something as a student here that I've gotten to experience, just going to the kitchen, sitting down, going through the line and eating with people. And I think that's something that y'all do really well, is include people in the community atmosphere that CrossLines embodies. So I think, yeah, y'all do it not only in the storytelling way, but in the actual day-to-day, like you said, part that really does matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And our organization is not only supported by donors, but by people who spend their time here and who spend the time helping us run the programs that allow us to help feed and help to house hundreds of people a year, feeding thousands of people a year. But we couldn't run those programs without volunteers who are actually, doing the physical labor of it and showing up and dedicating their time. And that's, just as important as someone who sends a check. So we just want to make it really accessible for people to understand what it's like to be a part of our programs.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And kind of shifting gears a little bit, have there been any specific instances that you have seen language, the things that you're saying, the stories that you're telling, shift a person's experience in the community, like the way that this ethical storytelling, this strengths-based communication has shifted maybe a specific person's experience of CrossLines or of the work that you're doing?
I can't point to like an individual person's experience. Our videos do an especially good job of our client-centered storytelling. We did a video a couple years ago focused on a gentleman named Raymond, who we met through our cold weather shelter and then brought him into services. And he was a senior gentleman who was experiencing homelessness, who was engaging in a not super healthy way of coping with being on the streets. And we were able to bring him into services. We were able to get him his ID, his paperwork that he needed, his Social Security benefits, and then ultimately help him get an apartment and be permanently housed. So not a transitional living situation, but an apartment where he could use his own income to pay his rent and keep everything good for him. And that story really, I think, helped people understand that it could be, where we are, you and I, anybody is not that far away from falling into homelessness. We are a lot closer than we think we are. And a lot of us who are lucky to have stable income, stable homes, stable support systems, we are not as far away from where Raymond ended up. We're not as far as we think we are. I think that story really helped illustrate that fact. And then the happy ending, of course, is Raymond gets his apartment and he, heals his relationship with his family, and he is able to not use substances as a crutch so much anymore, and, is able to really repair a lot of that led to him sleeping on the street. Yeah. And that's not just because CrossLines came in and swooped him up. It's because he, used his strengths and used his resources and was able to reconcile that situation with help. So I think those kinds of stories, when you're like really talking about ethical storytelling and strengths-based focused communications, is that we really tried to illustrate that it wasn't CrossLines that came in and saved Raymond. It was Raymond saving himself with the help of CrossLines.
And all the different support systems that he got to build along the way. And I think what you were just saying, it sounds like Raymond, through whatever means, saw that his dignity was worth his effort to pursue these other opportunities, and that he was the one driving that force. Or he was the driving force behind that.
Yeah. And a part of that is just sometimes people need to be reminded over and over again that they do deserve to have a dignified experience of life in general, that every person deserves to be respected and to be, in our values, inclusion, dignity, respect, empowerment. Those are really client focused, saying like, you deserve just as much as anyone else a happy place in the world and a safe place in the world. And we can help get you there.
Something that you mentioned that we haven't necessarily touched on whenever you were talking about Raymond is that you said he was a person experiencing homelessness. And that's something throughout my education, we've talked a lot about person first language and putting that person first and recognizing, like you said, people are people. We are all doing our best and we all need the support systems. We all need all the things that you're speaking into.
Yeah.
One more question.
Sure.
Actually, maybe two.
This
Sorry
is fun.
about that. How do you balance uplifting success stories like what you just spoke over Raymond with the realities of the systemic challenges that we see people experiencing?
Such a good question. And I don't know how to answer.
Yeah. It is a tough one.
It's such a great question. And as we all know, the systemic challenges, especially when you are serving people who are living in poverty, are, I don't want to say, and they're not insurmountable. They can feel insurmountable. And we are bombarded every day in our lives. If you are a person who pays attention to the news, you are bombarded with a set of realities that are very, very challenging for anyone who does not have resources to live on, or to cover their basic expenses, or to, or as a child who has special needs, or a family member who needs extra care, or has a disability, or has any, one of 1,000 or more than any of those problems. We live in the world where we are bombarded with those negative messages every day. And I think what we try to do is we try to acknowledge, and we don't downplay the systemic challenges. We understand that they exist. What we really want to focus on is what we can do, what we have the power to do in the moment and in the near term, and then continue to advocate and make people aware of what we are capable of, what you are capable of doing, to eventually lead to systemic change. It's not productive to talk about the challenges in every communication, or it's not productive to rail against the system in every communication. There is a time and a place where that needs to be talked about and that needs to be railed against. But I think what we really more focus on is the immediacy of how can we work within the system as it exists right now, and ultimately lead to future change as well. Yeah.
So I'm hearing you say meeting people where they are, validating their experiences, and looking forward. Sounds so simple.
Right? Isn't it just to tie it up in a neat little package? It's not messy at all. And it's perfectly simple every day.
Yeah. Just so much gratitude for all that people are getting to experience here in this environment, here in this community, and the supports that CrossLines is providing for the community.
Absolutely.
And within the community, being a part of the community. To wrap up, do you have any final thoughts, advice for folks who are hoping to use their communication skills for social impact? Or we're calling this space Empower Wyandotte, so to empower their community.
I love that. Empower Wyandotte, to empower their community. I think just at the very base level of it is to just continue to show up and continue to use your voice and be involved, and whatever resources you have to commit to the change you want to see, just keep doing that and be authentic, and I would say center community above individual.
I love that. So from Kelly, we've heard a lot about ethical storytelling, focusing on people's strengths, meeting people where they're at, and just so much support coming from you and from your organization, being a part of a community. So I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your words, your presence. You're always such a light to be around.
I appreciate you, Jessica. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. Thank you.
It's so fun.
Empower Wyandotte. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Ethical storytelling and strengths-based language. I want to highlight a study that I found. It was on parenting, actually. And I know that we're not specifically talking about parents here, but it looked at a group of over 100 parents and how confident they were in their parenting skills on a scale of 1 to 7. And everybody across the board rated themselves at a 4 about. That was the average. And they split these parents up into two groups. One was the control group, so they just left them be just as they were. And then the other group got to go through this process of identifying their strengths. And when I talk about strengths, I'm talking about character strengths. So adaptability, creativity, these types of things. And those parents went through just a couple of sessions focused on their strengths, identifying them and applying them to their parenting style. And after this experiment was over, after the couple of sessions were over, they reevaluated all 100 parents again, and the parents consistently rated themselves over a point higher on their confidence in their parenting skills, on their parental self-efficacy is what they called it. And the control group, the group that didn't do the strengths training, rated themselves pretty consistently at what they were. They were at a 4, and the other group was 5+. I bring this study up because it really speaks into what focusing on our character strengths as a community can do for the community. And yes, I'm talking to you, listener, and myself when I say this, but I'm also talking about the folks that we're serving in our community. And that leads me into the person-centered language portion of this ethical storytelling as well. And I found a paper called People Who Are Homeless Are People First. And I feel like that title alone really gives us context as to what that person-centered language means. People who are homeless are people first. And the paper just discusses how taking ourselves out of this frame of mind where the homeless is just a group of people that society has barricaded away, but rather each person who is experiencing homelessness is having a unique experience and has a unique situation. And they also have a unique set of strengths and resources available to them. And that kind of ties in with how we can really foster the strengths in our community to focus on the people in our community. So look at your strengths. See how you use them in day-to-day life. And then maybe a colleague too, or a child or a parent. Use that muscle of recognizing people's strengths, identifying how they're using them in their day-to-day life, and allow it to seep into the community that you're serving, whether that be as a volunteer or just a community member. The confidence or the self-efficacy that we have in our community really changes the way that we interact with others in our environment and the trajectory of our communities. I'm so grateful that you're here and to have these conversations with you. Please reach out, as always, with any questions, conversations that you might want to have, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.